For 5 years, a kind-hearted man of color tirelessly served customers behind the register at Brooklyn Market. He greeted them with a warm smile, remembered their names, and extended compassion even when his own earnings barely covered his expenses. His guiding principle was always to do what was right no matter the circumstance. So when an elderly gentleman found himself short on cash at the checkout, the cashier didn't hesitate, covering the deficit himself. Unbeknownst to him, this wasn't just any customer. It was the owner of the entire establishment. That simple act of generosity was about to profoundly alter the course of his life. Atlanta hummed with vibrant life. Car horns blared, streetlights shimmered against towering glass facades, and pedestrians moved with determined purpose. Yet just a few blocks from this bustling downtown core, nestled in a quieter district, stood a modest grocery store, Brooklyn Market. It was unassuming, a humble corner shop with a flickering neon sign and aisles brimming with everyday necessities. But for Darius Thompson, it was more than just a workplace. It was a sanctuary. Darius, at 27, had dedicated over 5 years to Brooklyn Market, witnessing a diverse tapestry of humanity pass through its doors. He saw mothers deftly managing groceries and toddlers, construction workers grabbing quick sustenance after grueling shifts, and senior regulars who simply craved a moment of connection. Darius made it his mission to ensure every single person felt acknowledged. His role transcended merely scanning items and issuing receipts. It was about recalling Ms. Lorraine's preferred tea, inquiring about Mr. Phillips' recovering hip, and sensing when someone was enduring a difficult day. Behind the counter, Darius ran a hand through his closely cut hair, his gaze drifting towards the entrance as the bell announced a new arrival. A crisp autumn breeze swept through the doorway as a man paused on the threshold. He was shrouded in a threadbare jacket, his beanie pulled low, shoulders stooped as if bracing against more than just the cold. Darius recognized that tentative posture, the kind that signaled uncertainty, a feeling of not quite belonging. "Hey there," Darius called out, his voice easy and inviting. "Chilly night, isn't it? Let me know if you need any help finding anything." The man offered a slight nod but remained silent. He stepped inside, his movements deliberate as if trying to avoid drawing attention. Darius observed him as he meandered through the aisles, his eyes scrutinizing price tags, his fingers lingering on more economical brands. He ultimately selected a loaf of bread, a small carton of milk, and a protein bar. A meager selection, clearly not for a complete meal but just enough to subsist. When the man approached the counter, Darius noticed the tremor in his hands as he extracted a crumpled $5 bill and some loose change, placing it on the counter with a quiet sigh. Even before scanning the items, Darius mentally calculated the total. The man was short. The man swallowed hard, his gaze dropping to the protein bar. "I'll just put this one back," he murmured. Darius didn't hesitate. He had witnessed this scenario countless times. The silent mortification, the way pride caused people to withdraw into themselves. Without a word, he processed the transaction, personally covering the remaining balance. "Nah, don't worry about it," he said, sliding the bagged items towards the man with a relaxed smile. "We all need a little boost sometimes." For the first time since entering the store, the man looked up, his expression inscrutable. There was something in his eyes, perhaps surprise, even a hint of suspicion, as if unaccustomed to receiving unconditional kindness. After a brief pause, his shoulders slumped, and he let out a breath he seemed to have been holding. "Thank you," he uttered, his voice rough as if those words had been long unused. "You have no idea what this means." Darius simply nodded. "Take care, all right?" The man clutched the bag tightly to his chest as if it contained something far more precious than mere groceries, and vanished through the door into the cool night. Darius gave it little further thought. It wasn't his first time assisting someone, nor would it be his last. For him, the rationale was straightforward. If you could alleviate someone's burden even slightly, why wouldn't you? But what Darius couldn't possibly have known was that the man he had just aided was no ordinary struggling customer. He was Nathaniel Carter, the billionaire CEO of Carter Retail Group, one of the nation's largest grocery chains. And for the first time in years, Nathaniel felt profoundly affected, not by the weight of his vast wealth, nor by the pressures of corporate meetings and profit margins, but by a simple act of benevolence from a cashier who had no inkling of his true identity. Nathaniel Carter sat in his vehicle across from Brooklyn Market, the brown paper bag still resting on the passenger seat beside him. His fingers idly traced the uneven edges of the receipt as he gazed through the windshield, his mind replaying the interaction at the counter. The cashier's genuine warmth, his unwavering generosity, devoid of pity or condescension, just pure, unadulterated kindness. It was an unfamiliar experience for Nathaniel. Throughout most of his life, people had treated him according to his net worth, not as an individual but as a statistic. They perceived him as a billionaire, a titan of industry, a name that influenced salaries and stock values. Even in his early days when he started with nothing, bagging groceries in a store not unlike this one, he understood that kindness was often a commodity exchanged for personal gain. But this man, Darius, had given without expectation. It disconcerted him. Nathaniel exhaled, his breath momentarily clouding the glass, before finally engaging the car. He hadn't intended to come here incognito, hadn't even planned on surreptitiously evaluating his own company's stores like some clandestine executive. Yet a creeping sense of detachment had grown within him over the past few years, a widening chasm between himself and the enterprise he had meticulously built. His board of directors discussed revenues. His regional managers focused on efficiency. But who advocated for the people? As his company expanded, he increasingly found it unrecognizable. Employees were reduced to figures on spreadsheets, labor costs to be optimized. Whispers circulated about store workers enduring long hours and stagnant wages, reports of staff barely making ends meet while executives reaped lavish bonuses. He had heard it all before in boardrooms populated by impeccably dressed men, but none of it had truly resonated until this evening. The chime above the store door had resonated like countless others he'd encountered in his youth. The aisles had carried the faint scent of dust, cardboard, and inexpensive disinfectant. And then there was Darius standing behind the counter, embodying the very essence of the business Nathaniel had for years governed from afar. Nathaniel hadn't even intended to purchase anything. He had simply wanted to observe, to discern what had been lost. And then he had found himself short on funds. He had felt the familiar sting of shame, the same feeling that had gnawed at him when he was 19 and penniless, when he was a young man questioning if anyone in the world truly cared. And Darius, this complete stranger, unaware of his identity, had simply smiled and preserved his dignity. Nathaniel clenched his jaw, shifting in his seat, his eyes momentarily catching the market's illuminated sign. This establishment wasn't even one of his company's chains. It was an independently owned store, not subject to the cost-cutting directives his managers insisted were indispensable. Yet the man behind the counter had done more to uphold the principles Nathaniel had once built his empire upon than half the executives populating his corporate headquarters. He let out a slow breath. He needed to know more. Nathaniel reached into the glove compartment, retrieving a leather-bound notebook. Inside, his meticulous handwriting filled the pages with observations from prior store visits, statistics, and anonymous grievances. But now, for the first time in years, he penned something different. He wrote a name, Darius Thompson. And beneath it, a single piercing question: how many more like him have we forgotten? The following evening, Nathaniel Carter returned to Brooklyn Market. This time he wasn't merely passing through. He wasn't there to validate a theory or to corroborate a corporate report. He was there because something about this place, about Darius, had profoundly affected him. He had spent years presiding over a company built on the backs of men like this cashier. Individuals who toiled long hours for wages that barely covered their rent. Men who dedicated more of themselves to their work than the company ever reciprocated. And now, standing before the same unassuming glass doors, Nathaniel pondered how many of them had ever truly been seen. He stepped inside, the overhead bell chiming softly. The store still held its familiar scent, a blend of stale coffee, old linen, and the subtle aroma of detergent. A few customers navigated the narrow aisles, their carts rattling against the tiled floor. But Nathaniel's gaze immediately found Darius, positioned behind the counter, scanning items with that same calm, attentive demeanor. Nathaniel ambled through the aisles, feigning interest in merchandise, observing without drawing attention. Darius greeted every customer, some by name, others with nothing more than a genuine smile. He shared a light-hearted remark with an elderly man struggling with his wallet, stepped from behind the counter to assist a mother with two boisterous children, and subtly slipped a small bag of chips into a nervous teenager's order without ringing it up. The young man's shoulders relaxed as he mumbled his thanks, as if that small gesture had preserved his self-respect. Nathaniel clenched his jaw. This man exhibited more genuine care for his customers in a 5-minute span than some of his own store managers did in an entire week. Then something else captured his attention. A man in a cheap suit, the kind favored by corporate middle management when they sought to project an air of importance, entered the store. He was short, with slicked-back blonde hair and the kind of self-satisfied arrogance that stemmed solely from a belief in his own superiority over others. Nathaniel instantly recognized the type. He had hired men like this. The man strode directly to the counter, cutting in front of the line as if he owned the establishment. Darius, ever patient, finished processing a woman's groceries before acknowledging him. "Evening, Mr. Lively," Darius said, his voice steady and polite. Nathaniel tensed. So this was the store's manager. Lively barely afforded him a glance. "Thompson," he clipped, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket and tossing it onto the counter. "Payroll locked. No raises this quarter." Nathaniel watched as Darius's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the edge of the counter, just for a fraction of a second, before he exhaled and nodded. "Understood," he stated simply. Lively smirked. "Didn't think you'd push back. Smart. Some of your kind don't know when to quit." Nathaniel felt his entire body go rigid. For a moment, Darius remained impassive, absorbing the insult, before lifting his gaze to meet the eyes of the man who held sway over his livelihood. And then in that same calm voice he asked, "Is there anything else you need, sir?" Lively scoffed, stepping back. "Nah, just wanted to deliver the news personally. Thought it'd be better than another rejection email." Nathaniel's hands clenched into fists at his sides as Lively turned and swaggered out the door, as if he had just performed a great service to the world. Darius let out a slow breath and carefully, almost ritualistically, folded the paper, tucking it beneath the register. Then he immediately returned to his duties, ringing up the next customer as if nothing had transpired. But Nathaniel had witnessed it. He had seen Darius suppress his frustration, how he bore the quiet, oppressive burden of being disregarded. He had observed the subtle clenching of his jaw, the momentary stiffening of his posture before he reverted to the kind of effortless demeanor that only comes from years of learning to let slights pass by. And Nathaniel recognized that sensation. He understood what it felt like to be told you were unworthy of more. Something ignited in Nathaniel's chest, a sharp, unfamiliar burning sensation. Disgust not only at Lively but at himself. He had constructed this company from the ground up, fought for it, sacrificed for it, convincing himself that every decision he made was for the greater good. But when had he ceased to truly see the individuals who made it function? When had he permitted men like Lively to embody the face of his stores? Nathaniel turned towards the exit, his thoughts already racing, his resolve already firm. This had to change, and it had to begin now. Nathaniel found no sleep that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Lively's callous words reverberating in his mind. "Some of your kind don't know when to quit." The offhandness of it, the way he had uttered it so casually, as if it carried no historical weight, as if it wasn't intended to remind a man precisely of his place. Nathaniel had been young when he first comprehended the sensation of such power, the kind that didn't stem from wealth, but from the ability to diminish another. He had spent years arduously climbing out of a world where individuals like Lively could dictate his worth with a sneer. And yet here he was, owning a company where such men still flourished. By morning his decision was irrevocable. He wasn't merely going to rectify this. He was going to dismantle it and construct something superior. By noon, Nathaniel was in his office, facing a conference table filled with executives who regarded him with the wary gaze of men anticipating an imminent storm. "I want payroll reports from every store in the region," he declared, his voice calm and precise. "Turnover rates, employee complaints. I want to see who's been denied raises in the last 3 years, and who made those decisions." A moment of silence, then someone cleared their throat. "Sir, if this is about..." Nathaniel looked up, and with just one glance the man ceased speaking. "I wasn't finished," Nathaniel stated coolly. "I also want a comprehensive review of our regional management. If I uncover even one policy that prioritizes profits over people, I will initiate terminations from the top down." He observed the growing unease settle over the room like a thick fog. Some of them had grown complacent in their positions, accustomed to the notion that Nathaniel Carter had become just another billionaire indifferent to the flaws within his empire. They had forgotten who had truly built this. Nathaniel allowed them to linger in their discomfort for a moment longer before pushing back from the table. "You have 24 hours, he said, turning towards the door. "Don't squander them." He didn't await a response. He had more pressing matters. By evening he was once again standing outside Brooklyn Market, observing Darius through the window. The man was still diligently working, still smiling, still bearing a burden that Nathaniel now possessed the power to alleviate. But tonight he wasn't just another customer. Tonight, Nathaniel Carter was here as the individual who authorized the payments, and he was about to set things right. Nathaniel stepped inside Brooklyn Market, the familiar chime of the doorbell cutting through the low hum of customers moving between aisles. The store smelled the same, clean, a little stale, a blend of inexpensive coffee and the citrus-scented disinfectant used on the floors. But tonight the air felt heavier, charged with an unspoken significance. Perhaps it was merely his perception, perhaps it was the weight of the decision he was about to make, the convergence of two distinct versions of himself. The man who had once fought tirelessly for his place in this world, and the man who had forgotten the purpose of that very struggle. Darius stood behind the counter, scanning items with the same quiet concentration Nathaniel had observed previously. There was no hesitation in his movements, no trace of last night's frustration. But Nathaniel knew better. He had spent years perfecting that identical facade, the kind that allowed you to internalize injustice without choking on it. Nathaniel approached the register just as the last customer in line departed. Darius looked up, his expression subtly shifting, not surprise this time but recognition. He remembered Nathaniel. "Back again?" Darius asked, his voice steady and neutral. Nathaniel nodded. "Yeah, figured I should pay for my groceries this time." Something flickered across Darius's face. Amusement perhaps, or curiosity. But he didn't voice the question Nathaniel knew was hovering between them. Instead he simply gestured to the counter. "Got something to check out?" Nathaniel exhaled, rolling his shoulders back. "Not exactly. I'm here about something else." He extracted a business card from his coat pocket and placed it on the counter between them. The embossed letters caught the dull overhead light. Darius glanced down and froze, his eyes slowly tracing the name, his brows furrowing as if his mind struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. When he finally looked up again, his expression had completely transformed, guarded now, sharper, like a man realizing he had been participating in a game without understanding the rules. Nathaniel didn't afford him time to speak. "I should have introduced myself properly that first night," he said, his voice calm and deliberate. "Nathaniel Carter, CEO of Carter Retail Group." Darius didn't react initially, didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at him, scrutinizing, evaluating. Then slowly he leaned back slightly, emitting a quiet laugh. Not amusement but something closer to disbelief. "Well," Darius finally said, his voice low, "I guess that explains a lot." Nathaniel observed him, watching the way his hands settled on the counter, the subtle squaring of his shoulders. He had seen that stance before. Not submission, not defiance, but readiness, the way a man prepares for impact. "I heard what happened last night," Nathaniel said evenly, with lively. Darius's jaw flexed. "You hear a lot for someone who doesn't work here." Nathaniel nodded. "I make it a habit." He allowed the silence to linger for a moment, then leaned forward slightly. "You deserve that raise." Darius's eyes narrowed just a fraction. That's so," Nathaniel held his gaze. "And not just you. Every employee in this company that's been underpaid, overlooked, written off by managers like Lively. That's changing starting today." Darius remained silent, motionless. But Nathaniel could sense the subtle shift in the air between them. A tension, a weight, something delicate and unspoken stretching between two men who had both experienced the harsh realities of power imbalance. Nathaniel retrieved another document from his coat pocket and slid it across the counter. "This is an official offer," he said, watching as Darius hesitated before picking it up. "A corporate position, community outreach and employee development. It comes with a salary that truly reflects the work you do, comprehensive benefits and a budget." Darius's fingers curled around the edge of the paper. "A budget for what?" Nathaniel's lips curved at the corner. For whatever you need to get that cafe of yours off the ground. This time Darius did react. Just a flicker, a sharp intake of breath, a split-second pause. But it was enough. Nathaniel had recognized the signs before, had seen what it looked like when a man had trained himself not to hope too readily. Darius carefully placed the paper back down. Why me? Nathaniel exhaled. Because you remind me of the kind of man I used to be. And the kind of man I should have been fighting for all along. Silence extended between them, not tense, not hostile, just profound. Darius regarded him for a long moment, then finally nodded. It wasn't an acceptance yet, but it wasn't a refusal either. And for now that was sufficient. Nathaniel straightened, pulling his coat more snugly around him. Think it over, he said, gesturing towards the paper. Let me know by the end of the week. Darius didn't pick up the paper again, didn't move to shake his hand. But as Nathaniel turned to depart, he heard his voice, low, steady, and enigmatic. I didn't do it for a reward, you know. Nathaniel paused, glancing over his shoulder. I know, he said. That's why you're the right man for the job. And with that he walked out the door, the bell chiming softly behind him, leaving Brooklyn Market a transformed man from the one who had entered. Join us to share profound narratives by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to activate the notification bell to begin your day with insightful lessons and genuine empathy.